long term. As we know, the supply chain issues are global, and we're seeing them, countries around the world impacted by the global supply chain issues. So, but what he's doing here, and what he's been quite focused on, is really attacking the issue at ports and the congestion at ports, which we know is a big way that goods are coming in and where goods are moved. So we announced, I think it was last week or earlier this week, it's all running together, that within 45 days we'll be launching $240 million in grants to improve ports. And in the weeks and months that follow, billions of dollars of additional money will be flowing to improve our critical port infrastructure. We've also seen big dramatic improvements at a number of these ports where they are quite crowded because the increase in demand and in goods that are moving has increased by about 20%. But because of the steps that have been taken in terms of moving empty containers, in terms of putting in place requirements or consequences for congestion, that has dramatically, we've already seen improvements in that. So the president announced this major ports plan. We're going to get this funding out. He's really focusing on the areas where we have the largest amount of traffic that's coming into the country, which certainly makes sense, and that's a part of what we can do more immediately.
Thanks, Jen.
Go ahead. Following up on Weeja's first question about workforce imbalances, you said that it's a workers' market and that some industries need to create more competitive packages, that it's a good thing, people have more choices. Is that your way of saying that the White House doesn't view this as a problem at all?
I think I also said in response to Weeja's question that there are some industries where we're seeing labor shortages. There are a couple of reasons for that. But some of the workers, and we've seen this statistically and in a lot of surveys, many people across the country feel this is a good time to change jobs, right? To look for a more competitive job. What I'm saying is ultimately that's a good thing. It is challenging in certain industries when they do have labor shortages. Some industries, in terms of some short-term industries that have short-term workers or seasonal workers, COVID is an issue there, and continuing to address COVID. In our view, putting in place requirements to provide more certainty, that's an issue. Another issue is childcare, something we're working to attack and go after aggressively so that we can lower the cost of childcare and make sure people have a range of options to bring more women into the workforce. So there's a range of issues. I'm not saying it's one thing. Certainly, we have concern about any industry that has a shortage of workers, but also I don't think we should undervalue the fact that many workers feel this is a time to look for a better job with greater pay and more benefits.
And then following up on the questions about gas prices again, just kind of taking a step back, there's some Republicans who have taken this moment where they've seen gas prices spike to criticize sort of the administration big picture, right? Canceling Keystone Pipeline, halting leases for new drilling leases on federal land, saying that sort of the administration's policies writ large have contributed to the rise in gas prices. What's your response now to that?
Our response is that one, we haven't canceled their existing leases that are continuing. Just to be clear, I know you know that. Not new leases, but just to be clear, and I know that's been a criticism, so that's why I said that, not an accurate one. Look, our view is that the rise in gas prices over the long term makes an even stronger case for doubling down our investment and our focus on clean energy options so that we are not relying on the fluctuations and OPEC and their willingness to put more supply and meet the demand in the market. That's our view. We feel that, but we also feel that there are a number of actors here, including price gouging, that we have concerns and we've seen out there. We've asked the FTC to look into the need for OPEC to release more that are the larger issues here, and that's why we've been focused on those options. Let me just keep going around. Go ahead.
Thanks. I think it's following up on this, and I kind of want to go at this inflation question a
Sure.
little bit differently. I mean, it seems like the White House is making a lot of promises on inflation, but there are some concerns that the White House or a president doesn't have a lot of power over inflation. And even when you talk about energy prices in particular, like gasoline, you're talking about the FTC doing investigations. That's a common tactic. It usually doesn't turn up very much. Tapping the SPR, that's a short-term thing. It's not a long-term thing. So I guess my question is, for the White House, you're making these promises. How do you deliver, especially on things on like gasoline, food prices? Yes, you can deal with child care costs, but these kind of bread and butter issues, how do you actually deliver on that?
Well, some of the biggest costs, the reason I touched on those is some of the biggest costs for households and Americans, and the way they feel inflation is not typically looking at a graph, right? They're looking at the costs and how things are impacting them, are things like housing and childcare and healthcare.
Gasoline is a very
Correct,
big
but those are big costs on people's households, and that's why I addressed and raised those issues. I'd also note that every outside economist, a vast majority, I guess I should say, predicts that inflation will come down next year. That is what outside experts are predicting. So what we're really talking about is how we cut costs in the short term. I've outlined a number of ways we would cut costs. I would note that we don't have partnership from most Republicans on that. We hear a lot of screaming about inflation. We don't hear a lot of solution agreement or willingness to participate in a solution, and that's really, or discussion of a solution, and that's really what we're looking for at this point in time. So I noted that the way that we can, and how outside economists are projecting we can address inflationary issues, is by continuing to push this agenda forward, past the agenda, because it will help spur economic growth, it will help spur productivity, and also because it's fully paid for. And that's why outside economists, Larry Summers, Moody's, Mark Zandi, don't think it will have a negative inflationary impact.
On a separate issue, on November 16th, there are about 200 acting positions in the federal government that will kind of lose their authority under the Federal Vacancies Act. What is the White House planning to do about that? Are there plans in place about those acting positions, acting roles?
We'd certainly love to get more people confirmed, as you know. I will check and see if there's anything we can outline further for you.
Just a quick follow-up on Dr. Califf. Obviously, so when Senator Manchin released a statement yesterday, he talked about his ties to the pharmaceutical industry and then subsequently the industry's role in the opioid epidemic. So I'm wondering if the White House is concerned that this could be a tough vote for Democrats who come from states where the opioid epidemic is severe, such as New Hampshire and Nevada.
Well, I would say that, one, the president has been very clear on his view on the role of the pharmaceutical industry in the opioid epidemic. He has also been an advocate for lowering the cost of prescription drugs by allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug costs, something we know the pharmaceutical industry does not support. So I think the president is hardly in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. I think they would agree with that component. That is true of the vast majority of Democrats out there as well. And what the president the reason he nominated Dr. Califf is because he feels he is qualified, he has the experience, he's ready to take on this job the day he's confirmed, and that's probably the reason why he was supported and passed with overwhelming support of Democrats and Republicans just 5 years ago.
Okay, can I ask you a question on Ethiopia?
Sure.
Thank you and welcome back.
Thank you.
Miss you the most. And thank you for taking question across the
behind you.
And
It's our regional reporter. We'll get to him in a second. Go ahead.
thank you for taking question across the room. Maybe the other thing is if we can limit follow-up question to 2, that would be great for everyone to have an opportunity. Ethiopia seems to be on the brink of a civil war. The U.S. State Department is urging Americans to leave the country and even providing loan for those who cannot afford to depart to leave Ethiopia now. The U.S., the AU, the UN are urging Ethiopian leaders to embrace peace, but we do not seem to be near any peace at the moment. Is there anything else the White House can do to avoid another Afghanistan-like exit?
Well, I would first say, and you may or may not have seen this, but this morning the Treasury and State Departments announced the designation of 6 targets associated with the Eritrean government in response to the growing humanitarian and human rights crisis and expanding military conflict in Ethiopia, pursuant to the President's executive order in September. And I know you've been asking when we would take some action pursuant to that executive order, and so we took some action this morning. I would also note that we are briefly delaying plans to roll out sanctions targeting elements aligned with the TPLF and Ethiopian military to allow time and space to see if these AU-led talks can make progress. If they do not seize the opportunity and the parties continue escalating the war, we will move forward with these sanctions, but we are currently leaving space for these talks to continue. Just one follow-up, and then I got to go to him, and then there's a cabinet meeting. Go ahead.
On this president's birthday on Saturday, is there anything that we've been doing? He's 79 years old. How does he keep fit? Does he exercise? We see him cycling. Does he do anything else?
He certainly does enjoy a good ride on his bike and does keep fit, eats healthy, except for the occasional ice cream. Who among us doesn't love ice cream? And again, as someone asked earlier, the president will be receiving a physical at some point soon, and we will release those details to you. Yes, and we will release those details to you as soon as that happens. All right. Hello, thank you for joining us. We have here Rick Barrett from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Oh, I don't know if we can hear you very well. Maybe we can fix some audio issues. Let's see if we can fix the audio issues, because I just have to go in a minute. Let's try again. We want to try talking again? We can see if we can hear you? Oh, no. All right, he's going to come back next Friday. Okay, last one.
Thank you, Jen. I wanted to ask you a quick follow-up. You mentioned a second ago that the White House was offering technical assistance to members of Congress when it comes to human rights legislation. What provisions were you talking about specifically?
Well, I was answering a question. I don't remember who asked it. It was Brian, right? Who asked about our concern about human rights abuses in Xinjiang, something we have taken a lot of steps on. As you know, and I think you've asked about, there is legislation. It's pretty common for the White House to work with Congress on either technical assistance or other assistance. We want to make sure any bill is implementable.
A provision that would have banned science funding for entities that were implicated in the Uyghur genocide was stripped out of the reconciliation package last week. Is that something that the president was